Davina. Like Mr. Zioga said, I was sitting here, it was actually 11 years ago, because I just had my 10-year reunion from the class of 2005. In 2016 we'll make it 11 years, so it's crazy to think that a decade has passed already, and you know, that I'm up here standing here talking to you guys. I know he gave you a little brief introduction about me, but what I wanted to do today is I didn't prepare a speech. I wanted to just stand up here, tell you guys a little bit about myself, some of the accomplishments that I've had, some of the bumps in the road that I've had, and hopefully at least maybe one person in this room can take something away from it, be inspired, you know, maybe learn from something that I learned from. That's something that you won't have to go through yourself. So basically, I was born and raised in Bristol. I went to Bristol Central. I was there, I graduated in 2005, and there's a lot of the same faces in the same room, actually, as far as teachers and administrators that were there when I was there. I was I played 4 varsity sports during my time. I played softball, as Mr. Ziogas mentioned. I played basketball for 2 years. I was also the captain of my soccer team, as well as softball. And then my junior, my senior year, I was an indoor track runner, and that was really when I gained a ton of respect for runners, because I ran as a middle distance runner, and we were a great middle distance team, but I also ran as a sprinter, so I understand all that pain that you guys go through, and I know that sport doesn't always get the most respect. So that was what I chose to do while I was at Bristol Central, and then I went on to, I knew I wanted to play sports in college, most likely softball, but at the time there was a question of, was I going to do track or softball? And I know that many of you guys probably sitting in this room are hoping to play at that next level. And one of the biggest misconceptions that I had was that because I was a top player in the state, every coach was going to come to me. And that didn't happen, and it doesn't happen for most people. So my first bit of advice to you guys is if you do want to play at that next level, you have to do it. You have to take that initiative. You have to reach out to schools. You have to, not your parents, not your coaches, you have to start this whole process. And if that's not something that you're willing to do, then you're definitely not willing to go on and play at the next level. So I did that. I gathered a list of schools. Then I wrote an email, then reached out to my coaches and asked people to make calls for me and so on. So I went on to UMass. Like Mr. Zioga said, I was a standout athlete. I went on to UMass, and at the time I had been accepted to quite a few schools. And that was another big part of my story, is that I wasn't just an athlete, I was a student first. And our class was very competitive. I was 13th in my class, and I had a 4.39 GPA. We competed like it was sports, and Mr. Ziogas' son was one of those people right up there with me competing. We were just very competitive class, and I think that helped to prepare me for college. Because I ended up having a couple options, one being the Ivy League route with Yale, and the other being UMass. And I actually ended up deciding to go to UMass because at the time I thought that would have been the best fit for me. And I really enjoyed my time there, but I also got to play for a top 10 and top 15 program at the time for Division I. So I was playing against all the teams that I, dreamed about playing for, like UCLA and Arizona and all these big name softball schools, and we're out there beating them now in the field. So it was a pretty cool feeling. Which leads me to my second bit of advice is never think that something is too big for you, because I am a prime example of doing something that everybody said I would never do. Nobody ever thought I would be, a big Division I player at a top 10, top 15 school in the country, and I was. Nobody thought that I would go on to play at an even higher level after softball at UMass, and I did do that too. So while I was playing at UMass, I was recruited excuse me, to play for the Puerto Rican national team, which is the Olympic team for Puerto Rico. And I ended up playing 5 seasons with them. And like I said, up until this point, everything was great. I was the prom queen. I was all state in softball. I had so many options. I had won $27,000 worth of scholarships outside of what I won from sports, and that was because of my academics. That was because of the hundreds of essays that I wrote for all of these competitions, and I put in the work, and it helped. It really helped in the long run. So I ended up going on to play for Puerto Rico, and playing against Jenny Finch and all these players again that I dreamed about. That were my idols growing up, I had a chance to play against. So I felt like I was, on top of the world. Everything was going my way. And I was in my 4th year playing for Puerto Rico, and I caught a parasite. And I was out there, I went from just barely making the national team to becoming a cleanup hitter, and leading the team in stolen bases. I had started every game. And then, like I said, I got this parasite, and I'm overseas, and I'm in Venezuela playing in the Beijing Olympic qualifiers, and I got struck with this. At the time, I didn't know what it was, parasite. I came home after 2 weeks of utmost misery, and I came home to find out that, well, not to find anything out really for the next 2.5 years, but my body went haywire. I had to give up my career of playing sports, and not to mention I was physically immobile for about 6 months. They didn't know what was wrong with me, but they knew that there was something seriously wrong, so they decided to wipe everything out of my immune system and out of my body, and I ended up going through chemotherapy. So I ended up going through chemotherapy for about 1.5 years. I wasn't able to work. I was in the process of going through graduate school, and I stuck through it. And as I progressed through graduate school, my health got worse. So there was a question of this word that I really didn't know much about, and it was lupus. And that's what I ended up having after all of these years. And it's an autoimmune disease where it's often triggered by something like a car accident or a parasite or some sort of trauma to the body. And that's what happened to me. So I found out that there was also a genetic predisposition in my family. Since my diagnosis, there's been 2 other people in my family that have been diagnosed, and unfortunately, there's no cure. So, at that point, I knew I wasn't feeling well, and I ended up also being diagnosed with kidney disease, and then taking my disease to a more serious life-threatening level, and that was definitely a hard pill to swallow. So I laced up my cleats one more time. I went out there to Puerto Rico, and I played that 5th year. It's hard to have to go from being a star to sitting on the bench watching, just cheering your team on, but I did that. And I gave up my whole summer, and I went out to Puerto Rico, and I trained on days when I couldn't lace my cleats up. I'd have this much to tie my laces with because I'd just be so swollen. I would try to hide a limp when I'd be running, any chance that I could get to try to show them that I still belong there. So I did end up just watching and cheering along, and then at the last game, it was a medal round game of the Central American and Caribbean Games. I went out there and I got my last hit. So I did get a chance to go out there and compete one last time, which was great because, as you guys all know, being an athlete, it's very hard to not play. And especially, when you have something that you are so passionate about. which is going to lead me to my next point. You have to find something in life that you are passionate about. I see way too many friendships, relationships, where people are trying to live through somebody else. If you're in a relationship, you need to have your thing, and he needs to have his thing. She needs to have her thing, and you need to have your thing. Because if you don't have that one thing, if not more, than you're passionate about, then you're not going to ever really be truly happy. Because when sports are all over, the world is very different. When you're out of high school, the world is very different. Especially if you do have a chance to go on to play in college, that is even a glorified, glorified sports world, because that is not the real world. So when I lost the one thing that I worked 19 years for to be on top, what was I going to do? Was I going to crumble? Was I going to go, into a depressed state and say, why me? I probably did for a little bit, but at the end of the day, I had to find something that gave me just as much happiness and filled that void just as much as playing the sport. So I found that in coaching. And I decided to, like I said, give it one more shot. And then I went out and decided, without softball in my life for a year, I decided that's enough. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to coach. So I ended up deciding there wasn't an opening in Bristol. So I went to Southington, and it's been a really great experience. And I've had a chance to not only help a lot of, athletes, but it's also helped me as a person to grow, and to realize that you can't, if one thing is taken away from you, you can move on and find something else to replace that's going to make you just as happy and just as successful. That saying, that cliche saying that everybody, you've heard a million times, people will forget what you did, people forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And that is so true. I can't even begin to explain how true that is, because a lot of those people in that room are prime examples of that. I don't remember what half of them taught me in their classes and all that, but I know that all those men over there are really awesome people and always made me feel really great as a student. And that's going to lead me into my last point about always having respect. There's nothing more disappointing than to see a great athlete who has no respect. Respect your opponents, respect your coaches. You're going to have coaches that you don't like. You're going to have coaches that you think don't know anything. But I promise you, you're going to learn something from every single one of those coaches. Your great coaches, your not so great coaches, your teammates. You can pull things, good and bad, of what you want to be and what you don't want to be from these people. So I really encourage you guys to set your goals high. I definitely did, and I reached for them. And I know that just being in this room alone, you guys are handpicked, and that's for a reason. There's a whole new world today with social media, and that stuff wasn't around when I was coming through, even college really. So just be careful. Just make good decisions. It's not, if you're gonna post something to get 500 likes and it's gonna ruin your reputation and the respect that people have for you, don't do it. It's not worth it. I've seen social media destroy athletes and destroy students, and I don't want that. That's not something that any of them are going to stand up here and say, but I will. And I've seen it firsthand. And I think that, if you guys are all in this room, it's for a reason, like I said, and you guys have made those good decisions. You have shown that you are a leader, and that is my absolute last point. Always be a leader. Don't be a follower. And if you are a leader, all the rest of those things that I just said are going to take care of themselves. So thank you for having me. I know we're going to open up some questions at the time. So if anybody has any questions.
Well, what made you pick UMass over Yale when you decided?
That was a very difficult decision. So basically, I had applied for an outside scholarship that was funded by Yale graduates that I won. So all I had to do was get accepted to Yale. And then I made the softball connects actually afterwards. And I visited Yale, I visited Columbia, I visited a couple other schools, and then I visited UMass. And just the second that I got on that campus, I was like, I belong here. And I can't explain it, but that's something that you guys are gonna experience if you haven't already, where something just tells you, I belong here. For me, I knew I wanted to stay close to home. But I also wanted that out-of-state feel. At the time, my dad had just been diagnosed with cancer when I was a senior in high school, and he's actually continued to battle it for the last 11 years, and just got a transplant last week. So he's doing really well, but I wanted to make sure that I was able to be there for him and my family at the time. So I was driving from UMass to Hartford Hospital all the time, and that was only about a 40-minute drive for me. So that was part of my decision as well, was also staying close to home and not venturing out to the Floridas and those type of schools where softball was really big.
Yeah, Bernie?
Yeah, what were some of the difficulties that you had, if you had any, in adjusting from a very superior athlete to dealing with coaching? It's a little different.
It's very different. One of the things that, well, there's a lot of challenges. There are some challenges being at that age where your girls feel like they can tell you everything and, you know, show you everything. So there's definitely one of the hardest parts for me at starting coaching at 24, 25 is establishing that line of professionalism between your athletes, your coaches, and whatnot. That was the first thing that I found most challenging because I'm just out of college and these girls wanted to be my friend. So, you know, not being that support system for your players, and being, you know, there to support them without being their friend, because you can't be your coach's friend until after you're done playing with them. But that was hard. That's a challenge. Also stepping into a school like Southington where there is this big pressure for winning. And before I went there, they hadn't won a state championship in over 10 years. So, and we've won 3 back to back to back. And I'm not saying I'm the sole cause for that by any means, but there's a lot of pressure being in any coaching position, but especially that coaching position. There was a lot of pressure after year 1. Okay, you lost 5 players, you lost 5 starters. What are you going to do? After year 2, we lost 5 again. Okay, what are you going to do? After year 3, you lose 9 starters again. What are you going to do? So there's always that pressure. And it is a 70 game winning streak. I have 49 wins as a head coach, and I haven't lost yet as a coach in high school sports. So that's definitely a challenge. I know that loss will come at some point. It's inevitable, but just dealing with the pressure, the stress, and honestly, one of the most challenging things about coaching is the media, and knowing what to say and what not to say, and making sure that you're always representing your team and your organization well.
Put you on the spot over there. Do you ever see yourself maybe thinking about coming back if an opening came in Bristol to coach?
Yeah,
Or
actually, was
possibly even at the college level.
yes. I was actually looking for. I'm a speech pathologist now. I didn't even talk about my career at all, really. But I ended up going to college for 7 years, and I became a speech and language pathologist. And they're also in the schools. So I did work in the schools for 4 years, and I've been looking for openings the last couple of years in Bristol, but it just never seemed to work out. I would love to, at some point, come back to Bristol and or coach at the next level. But I do have an opportunity to coach a lot of Bristol girls because I'm the head coach for a softball travel team, the Connecticut Lady Knights, and it is primarily made up of Bristol Central and Bristol Eastern softball players. So I am still keeping my ties with Bristol and supporting, those girls that are coming up playing. And I just had a girl last week, I spoke at her, she just got a scholarship to play Division I. So I just spoke at her signing last week or the week before. So I am definitely still tied with a lot of Bristol people and trying to help a lot of the Bristol youth. But coming back would definitely be something that I could definitely see.
Yes, Dave?
Yeah, can you give us, the room, a snapshot of the conversations you had with your captains at the start of the season, especially the expectations and
Oh,
what you look
absolutely.
for from your captain?
I had a player who was ranked 7th in the country for her position, and 2 days before our first game, I got a call that that she had gotten in trouble. So I had quite a few conversations with my captains at the beginning of the year, but one of the hardest decisions I had to make as a coach was to take that captainship away from that player. And I think that was the best decision, but it hurts, and it hurts to see your players hurt, and that's not something that I ever enjoyed. But one of the conversations that I had with my captains at the beginning of the year was for them to understand that they're that barrier between the coaching staff and the team. So anything, that really gets to me should already go through them. They also, as captains, need to understand they're part of the staff, the coaching staff, but also the leaders of the team. And it is so important as a captain to just lead by example. I know it sounds cliche, but do the right thing. And, and one of the best pieces of advice that I give my captains and my players is, two things. Don't just do the right thing when people are looking, because what you do when people aren't looking is really what defines you as a person. That's the real you. And then the other bit of advice that I give my captains is, don't go out there to do something, go out there to do something. And there's two totally different meanings to that, but I tell them that all the time. Don't just go out there to do something, go out there to do something. And that's the mindset that you want to have as a captain, but definitely as a captain.
Being in high school, being such an athletic star, did you find yourself more stressed out or pressured your senior year when colleges were looking at you?
No, I just, I felt very fortunate because I had options, but I also put in a lot of hard work. There were so many nights when I missed out on parties, and I knew for me that something that took the average person an hour to do probably would take me 2 hours to do, and that's something that I had to learn as a student, was how I learned. That didn't mean I was any less of a student than other people, but I knew that I always had to plan out, my time. I missed out on a lot, and I was very bitter at the time, but I had that support system from my parents, and I know that unfortunately everybody doesn't have that. And I have that discipline, and I have that structure. So my best piece of advice is to really just keep your routine, stay on track with it, set those goals, have timelines, and you'll be fine.
John?
Can you describe the scholarship process and maybe misconceptions that might be out there about how much money is available to athletes?
Yeah. So there are a lot of misconceptions. Teams are considered fully funded. For example, my team was a top 25, top 15 Division I team. We were fully funded, so we had the most scholarships that you can have for a softball team at the Division I level. That was 12. We had 23 girls on our team. So for me, coming in with a 50% athletic scholarship and the remaining part of it being academic money, that was huge, because that doesn't happen all the time. There is not as much money out there as people think. The percentages of playing at that next level are very small, very, very small. And not only are those percentages small, but once you get there, to play and to prove yourself and to prove that, you deserve to be out there is a whole nother thing. But there are a lot of misconceptions. And like I said in the beginning, if that is something that you want or you're interested in, you have to reach out. I have been out recruiting with fellow college coaches, and there could be an amazing player. Oh my God, look at her, she's so athletic. Look how she had a great arm, she's strong. oh no, I don't need a shortstop. So you could be the best player that that coach sees that day, but there might not be that need. And you could only find out what that need is by reaching out to these schools, you know, as early as possible. Not after you've already filed your application, as soon as you can, because there is not, that's a great question, there is not a lot of money out there. And if you are fortunate enough to even, you know, obtain a partial scholarship, that's a great honor.
What about the workload that they can expect if they are a college athlete? I mean, it sounds glamorous.
Oh, yeah.
But talk about the work that has to go in and the time commitment.
Yep, so basically I was expected to do a summer workout program on my own. But once I got there in the fall, we had 4 hours of practice a day. So I had to arrange my practice schedule, or my class schedule around my practice. And if there was a conflict, at a big school like UMass, it was fine because you had 7 different options to take times of classes. But it's like a full-time job. So, you know, you have the 4 hours a day of the practice, and then 3 times a week you had to lift on your own, which took about an hour and a half or so. And then you also had to do your running workouts, and these are with strength and conditioning coaches. A lot of times we got around rules by doing things individually, so it wouldn't be a team workout to do your lift, but you'd still be, expected to be in there for an hour and a half that day. Then come, winter, 5:30 in the morning, 3 days a week for 4 months. We're up working out for 2 hours. People running until they throw up. I mean, you name it. And, just establishing that schedule, that discipline, realizing, hey, you know what, it is not worth going out and drinking because what I'm going to pay for it the next day. It just wasn't worth it. And I really created a lot of discipline just simply because of that schedule. And not to mention, my team missed more days of class than all other 16 other Division I teams within the university, for the simple reason that we couldn't get on our field that had this much snow on it in March. So we played 30 games in Florida. We'd go to Florida for 6 days, we'd come back for 2. We'd go to Georgia for 6 days, we'd come back for 2. We'd go back to Florida, we'd come back for 2. We'd go to California for 6 days, we'd come back for 2. And yeah, it was really fun. And I'd get a nice little tan and all that out in those, all those beautiful places. But when we come back, it's the real world. And a lot of professors would say, oh, you're gone? Okay, so you need to hand that paper in before you leave then. And there's a lot of misconceptions of athletes get to do whatever they want, get away with a lot, and it's not really like that anymore. They're really cracking down on all of that stuff, and I found that, like I said, that time management is huge. You just have to make sure that you just stay on top of it. Your schedule will I felt like I had an advantage because I had the same schedule pretty much every day. And that helped me to get into a routine where a lot of kids, 2-3 months into college, can't seem to find that routine and end up, not doing so well or getting into trouble and things like that. So if anything, it helps, but it's a huge, huge commitment.
I've got one question, Davina. I know softball's been a big part of your life, but I know you've also been involved in the community with the Lupus Foundation.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So it's hard because I always have a lot to say. But one of the things that as you guys know, I was diagnosed with lupus, the life-threatening type that affects my organs. And it's been hard. And I did go through that little whiny phase for a little bit, but then I met someone else that had a daughter with lupus, and it encouraged me to get involved with the Connecticut chapter, the Lupus Foundation. And the first year, I just started a Page for the Walk, this is the lupus walk that goes on in West Hartford, and I ended up raising over $5,000 and donating it to the Connecticut chapter. And Connecticut is different where like breast cancer and a lot of other big foundations, if you raise money, it goes into a national pool. Whereas the lupus Connecticut chapter, it all stays in Connecticut, which is great. Because I actually, well, two things. One, I ended up starting a foundation, but starting that foundation actually helped me to get into another leadership position that I have. So every couple of months, I go to the Connecticut State Capitol building and I meet with various legislators, doctors, researchers, and I'm the one lupus patient in the state of Connecticut that represents all 18,000 people and has a voice. And I'm a voting panel member on this legislative panel where I get to help decide where some of the money's going that my foundation raises for research, education, awareness. We just opened up another support group in New Haven with Spanish-speaking leaders because there's a huge population out there. But I started a foundation called the Dream Big with Davina Foundation 4 years ago. Mr. Davis has helped, or 3 years ago. He's helped every year, dedicated his time that night, staying at the door, making sure everything goes well. And this year we raised and donated over $6,300 after all of our expenses for a very low budget fundraiser. And over the last 4 years, we've donated over $20,000, and it's really helped improve a lot of lives, and it's really helped a lot of people. So, like I said, during my speech, it's all that other stuff that you find off the field that's going to really fill, those voids and make you happy as a person. You will never feel bad about helping somebody. You will never. And I found that instead of taking my lupus journey and saying, why me, I've taken it and I've really helped a lot of people. I speak at various events. I reach out. I'm a person that the Lupus Foundation gives my phone number and contact information out to people that call the foundation just struggling with the disease and they need to talk to somebody. So it's a lot of stuff off the field that's really going to make you, like I said, a great person and really make you appreciated by other people.